Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Reality Shift from Apollo Games. Reality Shift is a racing game for 2 to 4 players, or 2 to 5 players if you have the Deluxe set. In fact, we'll get into what the Deluxe adds towards the end of the overview of how the game plays, but it's a racing game for 2 to 4 or 2 to 5 players, in which reality is going to shift around you through the use of you have these little magnetic little erasers that will clip on over there and start racing around the board as you go. But then the tricky part is you also on your turn are going to be maneuvering cubes such that you can sometimes go ahead and take this cube and swing it up and crush that racer, removing him from the board. That's going to be what you're doing in this game. You're going to be constantly manipulating this board in different ways, using these cars to go ahead and slide cubes around, to rotate cubes over the board, to twist, maneuver, flip, all those things, while you try to use those to adjust the pathways to help get you to your destination, or to just crush other players along the way. And that's going to happen a lot in this game. You're going to be doing a lot of crushing other players along the way. But it's basically a racing game with a moving board that will help and or hinder you depending on whose turn it is at any given point. To that end, what does a turn actually look like? Well, on your turn, you're going to do 3 things in any order. The first thing is you're going to go ahead and roll a die, and you're going to use that, well, again, in any order. So I'm going to go ahead and roll the die over here, and we got a 5, and then we'll follow it up by using the number on one card and then the action on another. And just looking at the board right now, I don't have a firm, I don't want to spend too much time agonizing over things, but let's go ahead and say we'll use this for our action, and we'll use this 3 for our number of movement. And the last card we'll hold on to and then refill our hand to 3. Now the way you do these is you do these in any order that you want. So for example, I'm going to want to move 5 movement over here. Let's put our speeder over here. I'm going to want to move our 5 movement over here and then see what we want to do. Now a key thing is you can only use the action of a card in order to maneuver a card that matches the same color. So I can use this on a white face over here, and I can use this only on this card over here if I'm using that. You have to look at the face up color of a cube and move that cube in the game. So right now we're going to try to slide this. I don't know if there's a lot of things we can do right now. Let's try to slide this in here, I guess. Can I even move around that spot? I could a little bit. It's not the best, but we're going to do what we can. Let's go ahead and move 5 and then 3. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe we'll go 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 7 is too much. We'll go 5. Well, it was 8, 7, and then 8 over here. I think that's legal. Yeah, there we go. So there we go. That's where we end our turn on the other side on these like little magnetic cubes. That's basically the idea of the game. You're going to do that until you get to the end zone, which you're going to start over here. You're going to end over here, and you're just trying to get there by playing cards. The only problem is, like I said already, you're going to be crushed constantly in this game when anyone does anything such as, maneuvering a cube with you on it, or maneuvering a cube in such a way that this slides up, and this slides up right now, it's going to hit you along the way and crush you. So there's going to be a lot of crushing in the game, which is where we get to the last thing we're going to talk about, well, before we get to the Deluxe set, which are checkpoints. You're going to want to get your hands on checkpoints in the game, because you're going to have checkpoints, which you can see a 7 over here, you can see a 3 over here, and when you cross those as a racer, you basically have to take the checkpoint, and you can now spawn at that checkpoint in the game. You can only have one at any time, so you want to be very careful about which one you pick, but that checkpoint is going to be your only real opportunity of having the game actually end at some point, as opposed to constantly just having players crush each other all the time, which is usually the way this game plays out. Now the Deluxe set is going to add a few things. We'll talk about the Deluxe adds, then we'll talk about my opinion, review, all of that. But the Deluxe adds a few things. First of all, it adds this board. Now a board, well, I'm trying to talk about the game without giving opinions till we get to the review part. You want a board. I'll say that. You definitely want a board. It doesn't have to be this board. It could be any board, but you do not want these cubes on the table on its own. Things are constantly moving around. You constantly want to see from different sides. Yes, you can get up and move, but it's easier if you can just rotate the board. So take whatever board you have. It doesn't need to be this one. This one's just as pretty and matches it, but you want to be able to maneuver and rotate the board as you play. The other thing it's going to add is going to add a 5th player over here. Some small additional rules around the 5th player because you have a little bit of protection on your side of the board over here, but it's going to have some small rules there. It's going to add 3 new cubes. It's going to add one that is simply a giant white space over here, this white black hole or something like that. I can't remember the name for it, but effectively it's going to be a cube that can be moved by anything and always kills. So if you want more death and destruction in your game, you should add that to it. Again, I won't heavily get into reviews yet, but I would never play with that cube. There's plenty of death and destruction already. The other 2 cubes are going to be one that sucks you in. So we have this one over here, which as soon as you enter it, it sucks you in until the next available spot, until you go all around it. You're going to be possibly pulled in multiple directions. You might show up one side, be pulled around, until you eventually get off and touch something else. You're just being sucked and pulled around. It's a little bit of a vortex over here. And then we have portals where you can enter one side and then pop out your choice of any of the other sides that are available to you. So those are the special cubes you have in the game. And then lastly, you have power-ups. Whenever you cross over a checkpoint and you don't take a checkpoint card, you can take a power-up card instead, which are helpful because they are going to help you win faster and not always die in the game, which is the biggest problem the game has, is the constant dying in the game. Which is, I guess, a good time to dive into my review, and I'm going to talk about the game, also talk about where the Deluxe adds some things, because I should say as well, the Deluxe adds one more thing as well, which is a bunch of map suggestions as far as different map layouts over here, with different rules in them as well. So you can have different map layouts, different rules, and some of those rules I really do recommend, especially Crush Protection. Again, the biggest problem this game has is the constant dying, so anything you can do to minimize the dying is a good thing. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into our review, starting off with ease of play. Ease of play is great. The rulebook is broken up into the Deluxe and the regular. The regular is very straightforward. It takes you a few seconds to learn, not a few seconds, it takes you 10 minutes to learn how to play. There's not a ton going on here. You have to read through a few things, check how each action operates, but you're really only doing 3 things. Roll the dice, use an action card for its number, use the action card for its ability, and that's it. That's all you're doing in the game. You're just rotating, adjusting, moving, and trying to race your way to the end, and of course you have to know the edge cases. The Deluxe adds a few more things, but that's broken up. You can get a game in with the regular game before you even touch the Deluxe, and by that time it's pretty straightforward. So ease of play is pretty decent as far as understanding and all that. Game time can range because you die a lot, which is something I will continuously say throughout this entire review. As far as what I like, don't like, and conceal as not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the table presence and the nature of this racing game. Meaning it has a nice visual aesthetic to it. When you have a bunch of race cars racing along the edges of cubes, it is something that pulls people in. That little magnetic aspect, it's a small little gimmicky toy feature, but it is nice, and it makes people want to sit there and play the game and rotate this cube that way, so you can go ahead and move around the board and just try to get to the end while you race up and down and around the sides of cubes. It has a great table presence to it. And the way that it takes the racing genre and then gives that extra, the 3D element, the kind of Tron-like theme and zooming around and doing all that stuff in a fun way that is compelling, that gives you a straightforward gameplay, very easy to pick up, very easy to play, different than other games in the genre because of the nature of the board constantly rotating and adjusting around you. It gives you pure chaos, make no mistake, but it gives you pure chaos in a way that is satisfying to go through, especially if you're playing this game with gateway gamers or kids or anything like that, who are going to be more entranced by that table presence and that fun dynamic of moving cubes around. Unfortunately, that's kind of where the things I like end, because we have to get into the things I don't like, which is going to be twofold. First of all, this is definitely pure chaos. Even if you remove for a second the part where people are dying, the sheer way you can maneuver and adjust the board means you can go from being incredibly close one turn to being so far away the next turn just because of how drastically things are shifting. And you might appreciate that, and it does lend itself to a very fun-ish experience, but this is not a game where you play because you're like, I'm a good player and I want to win. This is a game you want to play when you're like, I don't care what happens, I'm just here to race cars and crush things in the game. So even if you ignore the death aspect, it's just pure chaos. It's not going to have the level of strategy or control or agency that I would want in a racing game. But then separately, and more importantly, because the first thing I can minimize and say, whatever, I'll play this game with my kids, I'll have fun with it, it's just a good experience. The second part kind of takes away from that, because the pure chaos I can get behind, but you are constantly dying in this game. You are always dying. Every single turn, someone's killing you. Why? Because you can't win in one turn, so what can I do? Stop you from winning next turn. How do I do that? Constantly kill you, have you reset. Until eventually someone manages to have a good enough turn where the board aligns, the stars align, you get to a checkpoint, and then you have one more very good turn. That's kind of what you need in this game. You need 2 good turns. A checkpoint turn, and then an endgame turn. That's what you need. Everything else is just constantly dying and killing each other until that game state happens, which tends to almost feel like luck by the time it does, because don't get me wrong, it's not a game that takes 2 hours. It's a game you can knock out in sometimes 25 minutes, sometimes an hour. It depends on how long it's taking for those game states to occur. But it is a game that really is just chaos and just playing things until that game state occurs. 2 good turns, not necessarily in a row. You don't need them in a row. That's the good part. You just need to have 2 good turns, and then eventually you will win the game because of that. So there's too much dying. There's too much death to it. As far as I can see others not liking in the game, first of all, seeing things on the board can be frustrating. Even with the rotating aspect, even when you have this all lined up and you can rotate it, you're still constantly rotating, adjusting, and trying to get that visibility, sometimes peering inside holes like that are being built in the map. So there's definitely a visibility issue here. It also can be AP prone, analysis paralysis prone, because players might be sitting there taking too long to try to optimize, to try to find that perfect move. Because since you really realistically need 2 perfect turns, trying to find that perfect turn, sometimes you're like, well, if I flip this, if I rotate this, the movement itself, the racing, that's just a counting game and looking at your pathways, not too crazy. But the fact that you can manipulate cubes and you have 3 cards in your hand with often 3 different manipulations means there's so many different ways you can configure the board that sitting there taking time to try to find it can happen in the game. Before we get into final thoughts, talking about the expansion adds, like I said already, the expansion adds a 5th player. That's fine. You want a 5th player. It's nice to have. The power-ups, I do like the power-ups. They do add to the game experience because they make those perfect turns easier to get if you have a bunch of power-ups in your hand. So I think those are a good mix of things. This cube, I will never ever use it. It just adds more death because because it doesn't make your pathway easier. It's just easier to manipulate because any color can manipulate it and it will crush people. These two, on the other hand, these are fun. These add to the chaos. They don't make the game faster or better, but they add to the chaos in a fun way. They can add to the AP aspect of things, analysis of paralysis, in a little way, so you have to be mindful of that. And then lastly, the additional rules and tracks here. While the additional tracks are just nice for like configuration stuff, including having like, having more than just the basic 9 cubes, you can really have some fun tracks here. But realistically, the set of rules you'll have over here that the game adds, because they add a bunch of different rule options over here, and some of those will make it so that you can have, that you're more likely to have those perfect turns sooner, or just something like crush protection, which is where you can play a card to avoid being crushed, a card matching the color to avoid being crushed, and give up your next move. That is good, although again, even that's not perfect, because there's nothing quite so dissatisfying as playing crush protection and then having the next person crush you instead, so you anyways get crushed and now you don't have a next turn. So even that has its flaws. But anyways, that brings us to the final thoughts on this one, rating and all that. And I'd say that the base game without the Deluxe expansion is going to be a 2.5 out of 5 for me. It is a good concept, it is a fun experience, but the killing thing is just way too much. Way too much, way too many issues. I think that the game just doesn't work if you're playing the base game. In my opinion, it's not a workable game. It's not a game that I would recommend or play. It happens to be, it's still got that charm factor, which is why even with all that, it still gets 2.5, because it does have that table presence and the charm, and you could play it. It's just not a good game. Once you move up to the Deluxe Edition, I do think the Deluxe Edition does make it a better experience because of the things it adds that make it, again, the power-ups over here are going to be a big thing, some of the rules adjustments over there, and just the fun cubes over here that add more to the fun factor, even if they don't take away the fun issues. So with the Deluxe expansion, it's going to be a 3 out of 5 for me. So still not the best, but a more passable experience, and it gives you more tools to mitigate the problems that the game throws at you. Anyways, that's going to be my review of Reality Shift. Oh wait, other rules, other recommendations. If you want other game recommendations, first of all, if you like the manipulation of these cubes and all the fun little table presence that adds, I highly recommend checking out Tesseract. Which will not be giving you a racing game, but it will give you fun little cube manipulation and great table presence similar to this. And if you want a racing game with pure chaos that is family-friendly, gateway-friendly, but with a little bit more control and agency, then check out Tiny Turbo Cars from, was it Horrible Guild? From Horrible Guild, Tiny Turbo Cars from Horrible Guild. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.